Welcome back to the second segment of our episode, whereby we discuss the legal issues pertaining to amalobolo. So joining us today to do with the legal stuff is Mr. Brian Dube, who is currently practicing law at faculty of a law firm. Welcome you, Mr. Dube.
Thank you so much, and greetings to everyone. I'm Brian Dube from Semplers and Partners. I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion that we are going to have. Thank you.
So I'll start by addressing the elephant in the room. A law was passed in 2022 that a lot of guys that I saw were celebrating over. That Lobola is no longer legally, maybe I say, legally favored or legally pushed. You know, what do you have to say about that? How far true is it, and what are exactly the implications around that topic and that law?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I think we need to clarify that there are different types of marriages.
Okay.
Such being the case, Lobola has always been a requirement in a customary setup, that is, in a customary marriage setup. The law that you are talking about is actually the Marriage Act, Chapter 517.
Okay.
It explicitly refers in Section 16 of that Act, where it says the marriage officer is at liberty to pose, amongst other questions, to the intendant people marrying under the customary marriage, to inquire if the Lobola has been paid or any requirements regarding Lobola have been complied with. But then the wording is very specific. It says, if any.
Okay.
So that leaves a room to the parties. If that particular family or the families involved are of the idea that Lobola has to be paid, then the marriage officer will just confirm from the parties whether such has been complied with. So it is true, it's no longer compulsory, it's no longer a requirement. A marriage can be a valid marriage without Lobola having been complied with, but this is if ever there is such an arrangement between the families, between the parties.
Okay. That makes sense.
Then as far as civil marriage is concerned, Lobola has never been a requirement in a civil marriage setup.
Okay. Talking of marriages, what are the legal implications of a customary marriage versus a civil marriage in terms of property rights, inheritance, and divorce proceedings?
Okay, thank you. That's quite a wide question, but I'll try to address all the areas. As I've alluded to earlier on, these two types of marriages differ mainly on the basis that the one is contracted under general law, that is a civil marriage, and the other one, on the other hand, is contracted under customary law, that is a customary marriage. So all the laws, whether civil, all the marriages, whether civil or customary, as long as they are contracted as from 1921 January in Zimbabwe, we classify them as being governed by out of community of property regime, meaning to say each party maintains what they had before their marriage. If ever there's anything that can be a subject of sharing, is what they acquired during the subsistence of the marriage. So, such being the background, both parties from these two different marriages, they benefit alike. However, the situation becomes different when we are addressing or are dealing with the issue of divorce proceedings. Because in a divorce proceeding, we expect a court to dissolve something that it brought to life. So where a marriage has been contracted under customary law, and that customary marriage was not registered with the registry the marriage registry. The divorce proceedings are not the same as the one under civil marriage. The divorce proceedings of a customary marriage that is not registered with the civil marriage registry assume a form of a judicial separation, the ground being, we call it universal partnership, meaning the parties combined their forces and built up an estate. So the case is quite different from the proceedings of a civil marriage as far as divorce is concerned. Then the rest is the same with the proprietary rights of the children and the benefits. They benefit alike from both marriages.
So how does the legal side of marriage, the laws, protect or improve marriage? For example, we went from customary marriage to the legal one, the one that has to be registered and all that. What is the importance exactly? I think that's the other question that we would have. Why exactly should we legally get married? What does it protect? What exactly is, the point of it, as I may say?
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe let me begin by saying all these marriages are recognized under the law, and they are equal. They have got equal recognition, they have got equal protection and appreciation before the law, be it customary or civil marriage. But the challenge is here. A customary marriage, if it's not registered, it becomes very difficult to prove if it's not registered. And such being the case with an unregistered customary marriage, the spouse, in the event of divorce, the spouse faces has got actually a mountain to climb proving his case or her case, depending whether we're dealing with a female spouse or a male spouse. But the law is trying by all means to level the ground such that all marriages have an equal recognition and equal protection. What I would actually advise is that let's have our marriages registered. Even if it's a customary marriage, it can be registered with the registry. The act that I referred to earlier on actually accommodates that. A customary marriage can be registered. It is better to navigate and protect your rights under a registered marriage, whether customary or civil.
Okay.
On that note, so we've got cases of abuse in marriages. So then how do the couples who are in customary marriage, since it's not really legal, it's not really registered like that, are there legal consequences for abusers and violent people in marriages?
Thank you so much. Our constitution, the Constitution of Zimbabwe, affords everyone equal protection before the law.
Okay.
So there mustn't be any discrimination on whatsoever ground. So the parties married under customary marriage also have equal protection. For example, in cases of abuse, they can approach the court and be granted relief such as a peace order. They can be granted relief such as an interdict, stopping the other party from continuing abusing them. And abuse in this sense is addressed in its forms, be it physical, be it sexual, be it verbal. Yes, so they do have protection before the law. So their marriage status does not affect their protection before the law.
Okay, thank you.
I've seen a lot of memes around men who usually tend to marry older women from abroad so that they obtain a citizenship. My question here is, how do couples navigate issues such as immigration and residency rights when one partner is from a different country and they are married under customary law?
Okay, thank you. That one actually depends on a number of factors.
Okay.
Really. First of all, it is affected by the custom under which they are married. Is the custom recognized as law? Does it amount to law in the sense of customary law? Because for a practice to become a law in terms of customary law, it has to be uniformly done over quite a wide population. So if whatever kind of a marriage they contracted is something that is not alien to the community, then it qualifies as a marriage. And on the issue of immigration, immigration is governed by international law. International law does recognize customary law to some extent, but then it is left to individual countries whether or not to recognize a particular custom as law. So for purposes of immigration, it is always advisable to marry under a general law or civil law. As for customary marriages, it really depends on the discretion of that particular country which the parties are intending to migrate to.
In that case, talking of the marriages again, in cases where couples have to choose both customary and civil marriage, how do they navigate potential conflicts or inconsistencies between the two legal frameworks?
Okay, thank you. That's actually an interesting question. Maybe I must say one of the key features, identifying factors of a civil marriage is that there is no other marriage that the parties married into civil marriage can contract after contracting that marriage. So whatever is contracted after a civil marriage is null and void. It's null and void. So I'm trying to say there is no chance of having a couple or having somebody married in terms of general law and also in terms of customary law at the same time. Maybe we need to differentiate between marriage and marriage celebration.
Okay.
Because we can be married under civil law, under general law, and have our marriage, I identify it as a civil marriage. But then the marriage celebration part will then assume the customary nature. Or maybe sometimes you would have gone through the preliminaries of Lobola and everything, but then at the end we say, let's approach the court and have ourselves married under civil marriage. So that doesn't make our marriage a customary marriage. So basically, what can actually be done is to transform a customary marriage into a civil marriage.
So a civil marriage does not necessarily take away the culture aspect.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't.
Thank you so much for watching. That was the legal side of marriage. Catch us on our next episode where we have a question and answer segment for both the legal and theological side of marriage and Lobola. Thanks for watching and catch us on our next episode. Hello everyone and welcome back to the second segment of this episode where we're discussing the legal framework surrounding Lobola. Now we understand that it's difficult to separate between Lobola and marriage, but what we want to do is want to extract Lobola from marriage and actually discuss and molecularize its legal framework so that we can actually see the legal framework that surrounds Lobola. We've got the lawyer here, Brian Dube, who's going to be helping us understand the legal side of Lobola.
All right, so to start off with a very important question that I believe needs to be put out there. Is Lobola legally binding? Like, can we label Lobola as, okay, I've been Lobolwad, so now am I married? Is it legally binding?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. Well, maybe let's try and clarify the phrase legally binding. When we refer something to be legally binding, we are simply saying that it has, it can be enforced by the courts. It can be enforced before the court. So dealing with Lobola, in most cases, Lobola is not legally binding. It's not legally enforceable. It emanates from culture. So there is no express law that actually advocates for the enforcement of Lobola. So it does not have a legal bearing.
Okay.
A marriage can be a marriage without Lobola.
So does Lobola affect does Lobola affect marriage legally in any way?
Well, Lobola is a cultural practice. So it can only be an issue when we are talking about customary marriage. In the situation of a civil marriage, Lobola is not even an issue. But when it comes to customary marriage, the law in section 16, subsection 2, provides that the presiding officer is at liberty to confirm whether any other cultural practices have been complied with. And then the law goes on to say, to confirm whether Lobola or Roora has been complied with, if any. Meaning to say, the law anticipates a situation whereby a customary marriage can be contracted excluding the practice of Lobola. So it can only be an issue if that particular culture recognize a marriage as a valid marriage only if Lobola has been complied with.
Okay.
So if it so happens that the couple divorces,
Okay.
can the Lobola money be refunded? Because
Yeah, because sometimes you marry someone 2 weeks, they've already gone left.
so
Okay.
refund the money.
My cows.
Okay. Well, the issue of refund of Lobola also borders around the cultural practices.
Okay.
Culturally, there are avenues that may be explored to address such an issue. So yes, it can be refunded, but before the law, there is no express provision that provides for that. I think it goes without saying that if there is no express provision advocating for payment or should I say compliance with Lobola practice, there cannot be a provision also advocating for its
On that
refund.
note, I've got an interesting question. So, do the local chiefs in certain areas use maybe legal law to maybe decide on certain disputes in the community, or they use cultural law? I'll give an example. If I pay Nokanyas Lobola, I pay 10 cows, but then something happens, maybe let's say she does something that I deem unacceptable and I want my cows back. If I go to the chief and if I go to court, am I most likely to get the same answer? Am I going to get the same outcome?
Okay, maybe let's try and iron this out. Cultural, traditional courts are courts in terms of law.
Okay.
Customary law is law just like any other law. Yes, of course, it has to comply with certain constitutional provisions, that it has to be constitutional and all that, but it is law just like any other law. So traditional chiefs only administer customary law in their traditional courts. And then we have civil courts, the likes of Magistrate Court, the High Court, the Supreme Court, and all that, following that hierarchy. They administer both customary and general law. So in an issue like this one, traditional court is better placed to address a customary issue.
Okay.
But that doesn't hinder these other courts to address an issue, interpreting it in terms of the applicable or relevant law, that will be customary law.
So since Lobola is no longer compulsory in Zimbabwe.
Why do you look like you're happy about that?
No,
Why are you smiling?
Since it's no longer compulsory, in the sense that if I don't want to pay Lobola, per se I'm a boy, I'm a male. If I don't want to pay Lobola and my partner's family wants the Lobola, but then the law says it's not compulsory for me to pay Lobola, can I use the law against them?
Well, I think we need to understand the law very carefully. The law simply says, if the aspect of Lobola is an issue that has to be considered when one is marrying under this particular custom, the law is there to confirm that such compliance has been done. So already if the other family is saying we are expecting our bridegroom to comply with Lobola practice, then the issue will be whether is that a practice or is something that is alien, that they are starting with you right there. But if it is a common practice, then compliance will be expected. The other issue that we need to understand that there may be arrangements that can be made around Lobola, compliance with Lobola. There may be arrangements. So the presiding officer is simple there to confirm whether such an arrangement exists. If it exists, what is its nature, right? So if the presiding officer is satisfied, he will then proceed in terms of Section 31 of Civil Marriages Act, Chapter 517, which actually authorizes the presiding officer to go on and solemnize a marriage under customary law. So I think we need to handle it with great care. It doesn't open floodgates to say one can get married without a Lobola, without complying with Lobola. That can only be done if it is condoned by the culture under which we are marrying. Maybe the challenge with our Zimbabwean situation is that we are using a hybrid approach where we combine an aspect of civil marriage and an aspect of customary compliances or customary practices, where one goes through Lobola and then at the end of the day end up in a civil marriage. So we just need to juxtapose the two situations and also appreciate their differences.
Yeah, so for my guys, this doesn't exactly mean that we are no longer paying.
Yeah, because people treat it as that.
Yes, no, it just means that what is decided by the families will be enforced and backed by legal. Is that what we're saying? Whatever has been the agreement that I have had with the family, if we're saying there's going to be no Lobola, the legal side of it is going to support what we have agreed.
Yes, I think maybe we need to clarify that in a customary setup, the marriage union comprises two families. It is two families coming together, rather than in a civil marriage setup where it is two individuals contracting a marriage union to the isolation of any other person. So automatically, you find out that the aspect of Lobola doesn't feature anywhere where one is marrying under civil marriage. But it pops up where one is marrying under customary marriage. And how does it pops up? It pops up in this way. The marriage officer, that can be a magistrate, he has to put a question, or chief, because nowadays the chiefs are authorized to do so. He has to put a question to say, is there any agreement around Lobola? If it is there, what is its nature and the like? So then if he understands that everything is in order, then he proceeds with the marriage ceremony.
So you mentioned civil marriage, customary, right?
Yes,
customary. So I'm sure there are many people as confused as me. Could you please just brief us on what these marriages are, and how do they intersect with Lobola?
Okay, I'll try to differentiate these types of marriages. In Zimbabwe, we have a civil marriage. That is a marriage whereby two people come into a marital union, committing to be with each other to the isolation of any other person. So there is no third seat in a civil marriage. It is
no smaller ones.
Yes, no smaller. It is completely monogamous. It's one wife, one husband. And then on the other hand, we have a customary marriage. A customary marriage can be divided into two, depending whether it is registered or unregistered. So beginning with the registered customary marriage, a registered customary marriage is a marriage contracted in terms of customary law. So it is a marriage contracted in terms of customary law. Now, all these marriages are now governed by the same act, that is Civil Marriages Act, Chapter 517. And then if it is not registered, that is if it is, there is no record of it at the magistrate court registry. If you are here in Bulawayo, that will be trade court. Then it is an unregistered customary marriage. Then the third aspect of marriage that we have in Zimbabwe is governed by Section 41 of the Civil Marriages Act, Chapter 517, and that is what we call civil partnership. The commonly called cohabitation or maslalisane. The law has a way of recognizing that in the event of maybe child maintenance or separation or inheritance. So that can also be recognized for purposes of these issues that I've just touched: inheritance, child maintenance, and the like.
All right. Thank you so much for watching this episode where we got deep into the legal side of Lobola, Rora, or dowry. Catch us on our next episode, but please make sure to send through more questions as we discuss the legal side of Lobola, and we will have Brian Dube here ready to answer all the questions that you sent. Please make sure to contact us and catch you on our next episode.